in decision. Thank you for that. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about how these fit into the larger mold of youth champions. So we teach in 6 different pillars. We've got critical thinking, character and communication, business skills, goal setting and planning, financial literacy, and mindset. And each of these 6 groups has 4 classes in them. Some of them have a different level 1 and level 2. Some of them are just all the same. Financial literacy and mindset, for example, are all the same. This is one where there's a deviation between level 1 and level 2. And the way we typically try to approach this deviation is diving a little more deeply into one of the things that might have come up in a broader class. So this class is Becoming Your Own Decision Architect. That's level 1. Talks a little bit about nudging, about different things related to decisions, about how you can kind of, gamify your own life to make yourself a better decision maker, or at least more in line with what your own goals are. And then level 2 is basically saying, okay, maybe you learned this a year ago, and maybe now you're struggling with something a little different. Maybe you actually have been waffling with your decision making, or maybe there's something a little deeper going on there. So level 1 is typically a little more generic, and level 2 deals a little more with, all right, what do we do now? Now that you've been in this for a little bit. So I wanted just to provide this context. This is one of 4 classes in critical thinking. Our first one was the Open Your Eyes, Open Your Mind. That's a Jim Madrid course. Then there's this decision-making one. Then we go into problem solving and adaptability. And then the last one will be evaluating role models and evaluating your impact on other people. So these all 4 will happen 2 this semester and then 2 more next semester. So they happen throughout the year. Go ahead. Actually, I'll pause here real quick. Does anyone have any questions about that? Cool. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so the way we've structured classes as youth champions is just a little bit different from how Jim Madrid thinks through his classes. So I wanted to provide you guys with the idea of what my vision is for what these classes can look like. Of course, I want you guys to tailor it a little bit. You guys have already been getting to know the students, knowing what's working, what's not working. So feel free to continue with that. But if you find any ideas in here that help you do better at incorporating things in a different way now that you can see the vision, I'd love for you to grab onto these and try to take hold of them. So the idea in general is to start by warming up the crowd. So you're getting in there with all these students, giving them some pulls, getting them to start talking, getting them to start thinking about something a little differently. You throw out a quote or a movie, whatever it is, get them to interact. Then we give an education period of roughly 15 to 20 minutes, and that has 3 to 4 key points in it. So each key point is about 5 minutes long, and that gives time for both talking about the point and bringing up any questions, asking the group to interact, maybe fill out some of their workbook, whatever that may be. So typically, workbook questions are typically interspersed throughout the key points. So basically, the idea is this: you just teach about this idea. Now we have 60, 90 seconds, maybe only 30 seconds to answer the questions and give them a little bit of time to reflect on what we just talked about. And we're going to do a little bit of that together today in this class to kind of show how that can look or could look. So the main goal with interspersing these questions from the workbook is that students, 1, get to answer the whole workbook during class. 2, immediately engage with the material. A lot of times these questions are self-reflective, but about the material. So gives them a chance to take it in and think about how it applies to their own life. And then the third is it helps prepare them for breakout rooms. So a lot of times we'll go into the breakout rooms and want to continue discussing these same things. So the idea is that we want to give them something so that it's not as difficult when they get to the breakout room. They've already prepped, they've already thought about it. Hopefully they already have a couple answers written down so that they can share a little more fluidly and know a little more deeply what they think about it. I'll pause there. Any questions on that? Cool. Next slide. So this is just a reminder of the structure. There's a lot of words here. The main thing is what I talked about before. You start here, it talks about the flip back. So you start by asking like, hey, what did we learn last week to jog those memories? But then really starting with how do I engage with this material and these students? Move into talking through the class. And then that engagement period there. And so there's educate and then engage. That engage is really those breakout rooms. Or if you have not found breakout rooms super successful, finding other ways to engage in the large group format if that works for you. Our dream, our goal is that we do totally master these breakout rooms, but I know it's not always totally feasible. So that's kind of the ideal setup. And then after that, having some group discussion again to talk about how to apply it, what people talked about, getting the different little nuggets from everybody. Does anyone have any questions about this overall structure? Okay, great. Let's dive in. So we're gonna go through both level 1 and level 2 today. And we're gonna go kind of fast. And my main point in this is gonna be to kind of give you a perspective of what the students might be seeing from their end to help equip us with how do we make that as seamless or as helpful as possible for them. So this one is called Be the Architect. And the way I would start typically is I would go and say, okay, what did we learn last week? Have people kind of jog their memories a little bit. There's a couple of videos in there you can play, a couple quotes you can walk through, but mostly just around decision making or the impacts of our decisions. Now, typically there's entertaining with an anecdote, but my anecdote's going to fit in later. Again, there's always a little bit of fluidity in what you can do. So I'm not going to do the anecdote. We're going to dive in with the principal review. So considering that there's a couple things covered first, quotes, movies, whatever you want to show to get them in the spirit, and then we can move into the principal review. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, let's go back. Yeah. All right. So, let's go ahead and read this just so we're all on the same page about what this class is about. If it's okay, I will have, oh, hey, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, do you want to read through these real quick?
Sure. Hey, Michelle. So where we're headed, learn techniques to structure options for better outcomes, master techniques for presenting choices in ways that enhance desired outcomes, explore how to create environments that naturally guide better decisions, apply nudge theory to subtly influence and improve decision making without restricting freedom of choice.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to pause there and see before we move forward for you guys. Is there anything in this class? I'm not going to read through the whole preview with you guys, but is there anything in this class that stands out to you or anything that you think of why you think it's important to teach, like how to manage your own choices and decisions? I guess, is this relevant to you guys as instructors and people?
I think the last two bullets seem interesting. I haven't read the material yet ahead of time, but I would love to know what that is about the nudge theory and creating environments that naturally guide better decisions.
Cool. I love nudge theory because I love manipulating myself into good behavior.
I'm assuming it has to do something with surrounding yourself with people or places
Hmm.
that kind of encourage what you are trying to explore, anyways, maybe.
I like what you're thinking. I like what you're thinking. Anything else stand out to anybody or any reason you think it might be important to teach choices or making choices or decisions to high schoolers or how it would have impacted you as a high schooler? So I'll say for me, I think that I have a tendency to think a lot about my decisions. And I think learning a few shortcuts earlier on would have been helpful in some ways for me to not feel as overwhelmed by some things, especially when I was like 18, 19 years old going into college. So we can talk more about that later, but that's just to me, every time I think about this topic, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of things in there that I think would have been really helpful for me to be like, okay, how can I do this better? Let's go to the next page. This is the preview. And again, we don't need to read through the whole thing now because we're trying to cover a lot of ground today. But the main idea is that every single decision we make leads towards something. So we are an accumulation. Our lives end up being an accumulation of all of these either little or big choices. And our behaviors actually are a series of choices that we make on a regular basis. So if we want to understand how do we take a better hold of our future, understanding how we make choices and some of the things that have an impact on our choices can be really, really helpful. So we're going to actually do a little a game here. So we're not going to stop sharing your screen, and we're going to move into breakout rooms for a hot second to do an activity that we're going to have us do with the students as well. So go ahead and break us into those rooms, and you guys are going to order from a menu. Den, Kim, go for it.
Hi, Michelle. Can you remove me as co-host so I can join this account to the breakout room?
Remove you as co-host.
Yes. And then add
Okay.
me to the breakout room, room
Okay.
one.
Room
Thank you,
one.
Michelle. Yeah.
Oh, hey.
Oh, hey.
Mm. So you like didn't multiple people go into that breakout room and only Joseph remains?
It was just Sasha and myself.
Yeah,
Oh,
Sasha
okay.
and Joseph. Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. Ooh. Oh, cheeseburger got 0. Southwest burger got 0. You and Sasha, a good duo in there, figuring out what you're gonna order.
Yeah, it was
Mm,
easy.
easy. Excellent. Are prioritizing youth champions over baseball. Apparently there's a playoff game tonight that I completely ignore, and as a result, attendance might be slim tonight at our Ignite. We'll see.
Yeah, it's like the Dodgers are doing something tonight and it's impacting a ton of different things around the city. So
It's like that. It's a little
I
like
know
that.
it's like, what shouldn't the Dodgers be just chilling? Like they've had a great season. Why do they need to do anything else? Just be
They're so
content.
extra. They're so extra.
Well, at least some people have made definitive decisions.
True. Not me, but other people for sure.
Well, you made a decision. You're here. We're all present, you know.
That's true. That's true. I care very little about baseball. Very little.
Many people in the world would agree.
Mhm.
Just very few in LA right now.
I know. Yep. Yep. I'm glad I'm not in LA right now. That's a nice thing. All right. What
Don't
is,
worry.
are you getting enough LA for both of us?
No, don't worry. The Dodgers aren't here either. So
They aren't?
no, they're in New York City right now. They've gone home.
Huh. Okay. I don't know what they're up to in there. Let me broadcast message. Ooh, I can broadcast voice. Well, I'm gonna try this. Come back. Come back. I don't know what happened.
That's
We're
very
gonna
Godfrey.
find out. I'm curious if they heard it. Oh, they come back, so maybe.
It could be a bulk
Pheromones
order.
in effect.
Could
Huh?
be a bulk order.
It might be a long order. You're right. So a question quickly, could you hear me say come back? I was trying something new. I was curious.
Yeah, I heard you. And then I was like, wait, I don't think we actually returned to the main room. So I was like, okay, Dawn, I'm gonna leave the room. I think we can leave the room now. So I was
Great.
confused for a second. I was like, I hear her voice, so I think we're there, but I didn't see
Okay.
it.
That's funny. Okay. Dan, can you go ahead and share the results here in the chat? And Kim, can you go ahead and share your screen again and move on to the next slide?
Michelle, as for our breakout room, it's actually a tie because they choose the both same from the menu item.
What?
Like for my room, Michelle, since it's two breakout rooms, one is for Michelle, one is for Kim, and one is for my breakout room. For my breakout room, Dawn and Jaspreet ordered the same thing for themselves and for their friends. So it's a tie.
Okay. Can you tell me what they ordered?
So Jaspreet and Dawn ordered one Cobb salad and then one salmon poke bowl.
Ooh, I like it. All right, let's go to the next slide. So they ordered one club salad and one poke bowl.
Yeah.
Yep.
Both of them. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So you'll see these results were a little different for both of you groups. So Joseph and Sasha were all about the burgers, specifically the chicken burger. And Jaspreet and Dawn were much more healthy with club salads and poke bowls. So these two menus, you all were shown different menus. So this is going to be the goal with the students, is to show them these two different things and have them experience how much some external factors can actually play a role in their decision making. So I would love to hear from somebody. Maybe Dawn, why did you choose the Cobb salad? That makes more sense. Why did you choose the Cobb salad and the poke bowl?
Because I didn't see the burgers on the bottom. It was small.
Mm-hmm. Joseph, why did you choose the chicken burger?
Because I like chicken.
That's good too. Yeah.
I think Joseph chose the Southwest burger. I chose the chicken burger.
Like, I like Sasha did choose the chicken burger first, and then I was told to order for my family, and I was like, well, let's just get a smattering of things for everyone to try. And like, I like chicken, and so why not?
Okay. Okay. What are some subtle things? So Don brought up one of them, that the cheeseburger is really small on the healthy menu. Is there anything else on these menus that you guys think could drive somebody to choose one thing or another?
In our defense, we didn't see other items, I don't think. I think we just saw the 5 burgers.
Is the pictures, right? Yeah, the
Yeah,
I
pictures
saw
are.
the other items, and I chose not to go for them.
Oh, I did not even see that.
Okay.
I did see the burgers, etc. On the menu, but then when Dawn asked me like, "Oh, what do you like?" and I was looking at it, and I was like, "Oh, poke sounds good." So I stuck
Mhm.
with the salads.
Other items implies that's like not their core. Like when you have photos of your actual items, it's like, okay, this is the thing we're known for, this is the thing we're proud of. But if you're not into that jazz, here's some other options for the, the people in your group that are not into what we do.
Yeah,
right.
I agree with that. If I see like those burgers up front, like, and I then see, oh, they have poke salad, like, I don't know what the fish quality is going to be like, if it's
Yeah.
primarily a burger place. So I would be less inclined to order that. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I love all those answers, and they all relate to nudging. So we'll talk about that in just a second. A couple other things that I will point out from these menus, even though they may not have driven your specific response. The healthy menu, its tagline is even like healthy dishes for everyone. It's putting someone in a certain mindset. It's very fresh looking. It has these light greens, these whites, all these things that evoke what we commonly think of now as very health driven and fresh. Whereas the other menu, it says feel your taste buds tingle. It's much more focused on flavor and this like darkness, this depth, these contrasting colors that bring like a brightness and a vibrancy to it. As you guys mentioned, those pictures add a lot. And also how then you classify other things almost as less than, or like don't pay attention to this. And I like what you guys said about it's probably not their specialty. But on both of these menus, it's the exact same set of items, the exact same dollar ranges. So even it could get more complicated than this, but for the purpose of this, we're looking at just seeing what are some triggers that make somebody think a certain way when they want to order food. And part of the point of this, you can go to the next slide, is to help just prime people for the idea that even when they're making decisions, there are some things that are outside of their own preferences that might play into impacting their choice or behavior. So the visibility of options, being able to have something presented in a certain way, where it is in terms of your eyesight, all of these things can play into how you choose something. And what you don't choose, even if you might actually prefer it. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll start talking through some nudging stuff. So does anyone know the term nudging? No? Okay, so nudging is, it says here at the bottom, but nudging is this concept that basically people's choices can be subtly guided without restricting their freedom of choice. So similar to that menu, you could have chosen any different item you wanted to. There was no restriction of your freedom of choice, but you were definitely nudged in a certain direction. Can anyone think of any other potential nudges, thinking of it as something that might guide your behavior or your choice that doesn't necessarily restrict your freedom of choice? Can anyone think of these kinds of things that happen in their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, like word of mouth. If I hear my friends or coworkers talking about something, some place, they just try it and it's like, all right, it's amazing. I have choices to go to another place, right? But I still might prefer to go to that one because I heard about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I always like to know what people are saying, especially people I trust. Anyone else think of anything?
A supermarket.
What about the
retailers pay big bucks for eye levels, shelf space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one's one of, so I used to work in retail for a few years. And I think that when I saw the different pricing for different options from there, and also just, I always feel like it's such a trick to have all the candy at the, at the checkout aisles when people are just grabbing little things at the end. That's a subtle nudge too. It's nudging people to buy certain things. That's where a lot of nudges come from, are people who want to make money off of us, which is why I think it's important to realize at least that there are things that are going on outside of ourselves that can dictate what we want to do. So I love that grocery store, that retail option. Anyone else think of anything? So I'll walk through a couple of these. You guys already got, a couple of them, but there's also things that are nudging us all the time, like default options. Um, so for example, we've got the default option of when we get a license that we can say we have to opt in to being a donor, an organ donor. In other countries that have it the opposite way around, you opt out of being an organ donor. It is basically double the amount of people, if not triple the amount of people who sign up to be organ donors, because it all matters on what your default was originally. People typically stay with the default. So default options are one, simplifying choices. So if somebody wants you to make a certain decision, sometimes they'll make everything else sound really complicated, and the one option they want you to choose sounds really simple. So that's one way also to nudge in a particular area, is simplify it. Framing things, so you frame the benefits of something or the negatives of something else, all of that is nudging as well. So basically anything marketing wise is a nudge. Feedback and reminders, this one's super basic, just having a reminder on your phone for every time you want to do a push-up. That is a gentle nudge to tell you, okay, this is an action I wanted to take and I'm gonna take it now. You guys got a lot of the visibility stuff in terms of like eye length, or whatever you see is what you tend to choose. Visibility in terms of how many people are talking about it. How many people do you even hear of are talking about it? They say 10 million people said absolutely go with this option. It sounds, like a good thing. And finally, some incentives and rewards is another option. So all of these are in the facilitator guide. I would encourage this time to be a time to like chat with the students, see what they have experienced. And then there are also in the facilitator guide specific examples for all of these different options as well. And a big part of this, though, is we want to do this practice together. So we're going to spend some time, and I want you guys to see what the workbook looks like that the students are filling out, and spend some time doing a workshop ourselves on what this practice is. So Kim, go ahead and share that workbook link, or Dan, go ahead and share that workbook link again, please. And Kim, go ahead and share your screen with the workbook in it. And so now that we'll have talked about nudges, talked about decision making a little bit and how these different things play a role in our lives, we can go into the workbook and figure out like, okay, how does this apply to our lives? So in this workbook submission link, this is what the students see. They'll scroll down, they'll choose which level they're in. So level 1, level 2, this one is a level 1 class, so they'll choose level 1. And then a set of questions unfolds. So we're going to start with the first one. These are the same questions that are listed in the PowerPoint deck. So if you're looking at the PowerPoint deck, you don't need to have this up. You can just be saying like, hey, here's a question. Let's take a few minutes and answer this, or a couple seconds and answer this together. So for this one, I'm going to say, let's start by having a brain dump. We're going to take 30 seconds, actually, sorry, 25 seconds, Kim, 25 seconds on the clock, and write down a list of all the decisions and behaviors you can think of that you want to change, but maybe find it challenging to do so on a regular basis. So go ahead and start that clock, Kim.
You hear me, Michelle?
I'm sorry?
Oh, I think I'm done.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so the next thing I want you to do is just take 2 seconds, look at this list of different things you've come up with, and I want you to think about which one, if you actually did change it and did change your choice or your decision around this, would make the biggest impact on your life, your whole life. So the biggest impact, put that down. And then we're gonna spend another 20 seconds. Kim will play some music while we answer the next question. So 20 seconds to list out the things that you could do to nudge yourself in the right direction with this particular habit or behavior or thing you want to change. All right, how are we doing, Kim?
Yeah. I thought I was sharing. Hold on.
No, you're good. Are we good?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Are we done? Kim? Kim? Oh, okay. Then yeah. All right, great. So that wasn't done perfectly, but here's the idea. Is that while people have a few minutes or a few seconds to answer questions, we can play music in the background. It can be as sleepy as that. It could be something a little more upbeat. It could be cafe music. It could be something else, but it's possible to play that in the background while people take 25, 30 seconds to answer these questions. So all together in here, actually, I'll ask this next question. I'd love to hear from somebody. What was something that they think of that would actually have the biggest impact on their life if they changed that behavior and made a different choice? Anyone want to share?
I said workout in the morning.
That's a good one. Were there any nudges you thought of to go along with that?
Yeah, my nudges were, hold on, let me go back to my list. Yeah, sleep earlier, stop being on the phone like a couple of hours before going to bed. Don't take naps if I have the chance.
I love that. I love that because as we go through this, and I'm going to kind of go through this lightning speed, but there's a few other questions in here. They're all related still to the same topic, but they're getting to different ideas. Like there are nudges that we have right now that might nudge us in the wrong direction. So maybe taking naps or having my phone on, or all those things might be nudging us actually in the wrong direction. Whereas there are things that nudge us in the right direction. So getting somebody to think of like, oh yeah, I'll wear my gym clothes to bed is different from thinking, okay, what are the things that I'm doing right now that actually nudge me maybe in the direction that I don't want to go in, and how can I reinvent those? So the goal of this will be to work through these as a group. And then Kim, we can go back to the slide deck. And have people basically run through it, and then we'll transition from there into breakout rooms, where we do have the breakout rooms basically for them to be able to talk more deeply about this and the different things they experience and how they would nudge their own behavior. And then also in each facilitator guide, and our staff will be ready and queued up with this as well, there are a set of several additional questions so that we can put those into the chat for people to learn as well. Or use as well if we're running out of stuff to work with. So that is at a high level what this class is about. I'll stop briefly. Are there any questions on this one before we move on to the next one? All right, let's keep going. We'll go past this one. This is where we start asking, how do you apply it in your own life? And these are the questions that are in the workbook. Go to the next one. And now we're going to talk about battling indecision. So this one, again, you would start the same way. You start with so battling indecision, you'll start with a video or a quote. You'll flip back to the last one, ask people what they learned last week. So we'll go ahead and move through that kind of quickly. You can talk about an anecdote or a story that you yourself struggled with indecision. For me, again, my big one is I had such a hard time nailing down what I wanted to major in. But I also had a really hard time nailing down where I wanted to go to college and where I wanted to apply to. And right now is college application season. So this is when all the students are figuring out, where do I apply? What am I trying to get into? Do I apply as undeclared or declared? If I want to apply as declared, what do I want my major to be? So they're facing all these really big decisions. And I know for a lot of people that can be really overwhelming. So that's some context. Applications are due either in early December or November. So they're right on the cusp of this. So I'm going to have Joseph. Can you read quickly through these weir-headed bullet points?
Sure. Understanding decision paralysis. Explore the psychological basis and real-life impact of decision paralysis caused by too many options. Prioritizing your values. Learn how identifying and prioritizing personal values can streamline decision-making and align choices with what truly matters. Setting clear criteria and boundaries. Discover just techniques to establish clear criteria and boundaries to simplify choices and reduce decision fatigue. Embrace imperfection. Understand the importance of making good enough decisions and learn strategies to embrace imperfection and learn from mistakes. Practical exercises. Engage in reflective exercises, group discussions, and practical activities to apply the concepts and techniques in real-life scenarios. Interactive learning. Participate in breakout room discussions to share experiences, insights, and strategies for overcoming decisions and making confident choices.
Great. Great. So, so basically our goal is to learn what decision paralysis is and some of the tactics for how to deal with it. So we'll go to the next slide. And again, you can watch a video in advance. There's some good videos we've got. We'll breeze past the preview right now onto the next slide. Again, you would read this in class or have students read it silently. Choose the parts that stand out to them. Understanding the paradox of choice. Just curious, who here has heard of or knows about the paradox of choice? Joseph, yes, Don, okay, a bunch of us. Cool. So actually, do either of you want to take a stab at explaining it, or do you want me to dive into it?
Having a lot of choice is good, but can lead to paralysis, basically.
Right.
You get overwhelmed.
Yes. Yeah. And so so this one I also related back to the idea of candy at the checkout line by the register. Is you go through your shopping and you're shopping the whole time. You're looking for all these different things. And even if you're just going there for cereal, you have dozens and dozens of cereals to choose from. If you're not even thinking about cereal, but you're thinking about breakfast food, you have cereal and eggs and bacon. And do you want it frozen, or do you want to microwave it, or what do you want to do? Like all of these different things that go into making choices, that by the time you are at the checkout line, your brain is fried. You're done making choices. And that's why they put candy there, because they know you are weak and they will get you at your weakest. And so it's not quite as vicious as that. But the idea is, how do, like, there are people who know once you have decision fatigue, you are tired and might not make the best choices. This is one of the results of the paradox of choice. But just like Don said, paradox of choice says, while a lot of options are beneficial in some ways, there are also some pretty negative things that they can impact. You can have a longer decision-making time because you're trying to make the best choice when you have so many options. You might have increased anxiety because you might have some self-doubt, might worry that you're making the wrong choice. What are you doing? How do I analyze all of these things? It might lead to inaction, where you avoid making decisions altogether and maybe even revert back to just the status quo. It could result in decreased satisfaction. I think this one's really interesting because if you have a lot of options and there's anything remotely negative about the option you choose, it's like, well, maybe I could have done better. Maybe I could have done a better decision. And then another one, oh, sorry, I love this. Okay, so Jaspreet added, online dating right now is the paradox of choice. I won't use it in my meeting, not sure if it's the right choice, but that's the first example that comes to my mind. Why do you say that, Jaspreet?
I don't know if anyone else is, experiencing the joys of online dating, but since there's so many choices out there on each app and each one's geared to different things, I feel people are very quick to move on, or even like to make it to the first step of like just even saying hi to each other, moving past like, mundane conversation and even setting up an actual date. Like you lose a lot of people even to get to the step of actually, meeting someone in person, because there's so much noise on there in terms of choices.
I love that term of noise. I think dating, probably some of them know, but I don't know if they're allowed on the dating apps. I don't know if that's something minors are allowed on. I would assume,
wasn't gonna use that example.
no, but I think it's such a good thing. I was trying to think
thought-
of where else do I hear that noise? And I would say when it's not exactly the same, but like Netflix or something where there's so many options, it feels like, okay, well, maybe I would actually choose if I only had these two. If I could only choose between this show and this show, I'd be like, oh, of course, I want this one way more. And that would be easy. But when there's so many choices, I've definitely had times where I spend like half an hour being like, I don't know, any of them would be fine, I guess.
Yeah, or I was gonna say even like picking a place to order food from or go eat outside on the day you do want to go eat out, like just looking up on Yelp, like your friends were all just looking up on Yelp or Google, and like you can't come to a decision sometimes for a long time because there are so many options.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, I feel that so much. So the next thing after kind of going over this, and you can interact with people with it, the next thing would be to pose a question to them. So the question here, and it's in the student workbook. So if we go back into the student workbook, Kim, and select instead of level 1, level 2, then the first question in there is going to be, think of an important choice you have to make right now and list out some of the reasons you are having difficulty making that choice. So if we run back to that other list, you'll see that if they come down here to go to level 2, that here they have the option to write down that important choice. And you can emphasize, if they can't think of something super important, it doesn't need to be that important. Maybe it's what dress to wear to homecoming, whatever it is, there can be something that's just a choice that they're having trouble making right now. And then some of the reasons they're having trouble making that choice. These are some options, but they could just list out a whole bunch. And we're going to do this similarly, or I would encourage you to do it similarly to how we did it in the other one, which will hopefully run smoother the next time. But the idea of being like, hey, Kim, just set a timer for 20 seconds and everybody write down every thing that's having making it difficult for you to make this choice right now. What are the issues? And have people just brain dump it for a second. That way they're answering the workbook and they're interacting with the material. So let's go ahead and jump back to the PowerPoint and go to the next slide. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. And then the next one, yeah, so this is the question that they have in the workbook. So it mirrors it exactly, you know exactly where it is. These are practical steps for decision making. This is definitely also a discussion time, but these are 3 tactics that make decision making easier when you do have decision paralysis. So number one, limit your options. Number two, give yourself a time limit, know exactly when you want to cut off so that you have to make a decision by then. And then also break it down into smaller decisions. Sometimes the decision is just actually not one big decision, but a series of little ones. And it's about making all those little ones first. So one thing I want to talk about real quick with the limit your options is that it's really helpful to have a metric that helps us start with limiting our options. So for example, values is a really good way to do that. So if your students are like, number one, my biggest value is studying. My second biggest value is hanging out with friends. And my third biggest value is earning money. Then suddenly when they're deciding what to do on a Saturday and they have all these options, they could go to the skate park, they could go to the movies, they could go to the mall, they could study math, they could study English, they could study science, they could fill out a job resume, they could have an interview, all these different things. Suddenly, if you know your priority is studying, then it at least limits some of those options. So you can just focus on like, okay, I'm just gonna, if studying is my priority right now, I will just focus on those, and the rest of that noise I can shut down. So then the next one is a pose the question again, and it helps walk through basically the same issue that they already identified. Like, this is the choice I'm struggling with making. We can go to the next slide. This one asks, okay, so look at that choice and list from those 3 practical steps of limiting your option, giving yourself more time, and breaking it into smaller decisions. Which of those steps do you think would work best for this particular choice? And how can you apply it to this decision? And allow them that time, 30 to 60 seconds, to write down what they think about that. So they're immediately engaging with this and thinking about how these specific practical steps relate. Any questions here or comments or ideas so far?
Michelle, I have one thing on this, and
Yes, please.
I because I have level 2, so I've kind of been working through my PowerPoint and some questions. And we want this to be interactive, right? We want this to be a group discussion, both for the group at large and then as we break into, do the breakouts. But the very first premise here is identify something that you're struggling with, a choice you're struggling with right now. And it's a very personal thing, right?
Mm.
I can't get these kids sometimes to even say what they've had for breakfast, let alone something that's internal that they're struggling with. So I'm envisioning just a lot of dead air time with this, as opposed to giving them a scenario. And it may be something that a lot of them deal with, what to do after college, and then work through hypotheticals. Maybe it applies to some, maybe it doesn't apply to others. But when it's such a personal thing, I just have a feeling that a lot of them are going to sit there and not want to open up and share. And then the whole thing's going to just circle the drain for 45 minutes.
I think that's a really good point. What I would say to that, I think I would love to mix those 2 ideas together. So one thing I'd love to do is I would love for them to continue to, in their workbook, work through their own thing. And then maybe also present like, hey, okay, so here's the issue. Here's the issue at hand, figuring out what you do after college or what you do after high school, and pose a scenario that then people can interact with that one, so that the questions that they're answering in the workbook can be more personal and can try to have more application to it. Because a lot of times people do share more personally in that workbook, but then have something that for discussion is less personal. What do you think about that, Don? Or are you thinking, no, that wouldn't work either?
I don't know. And it's hard for me because I've been jumping groups every other week. So, but in general, it's hard to get them to open up. When the more personal it becomes, the more they kind of shut down. And this is a very personal question. What are you struggling with? It's like, I'm not their therapist. I'm the facilitator.
That's true too. That's true too. I would be curious to hear from you, Joseph. What do you think? I know you also have a level 2 class. How would you frame this differently to encourage people to both answer questions and also be engaged. And we still do have time to change all the questions if we need to. What do you think?
I think my students would have some decisions to make. I think for me, like what I'm thinking through is like, fine, if they don't have a decision, I'm going to assume that every single one of them is thinking about college. And like in that, I am going to frame my examples around college, which is something that they most commonly are thinking about in general. And so like, for example, like in my PowerPoint, what I'm thinking about is like pros and cons list of like how to think about college, decision matrix on how to think about college. And like just frame it around college and say like so many of you are thinking about college right now. And so in that, like maybe this is the example thing to work through. If you feel like your students like won't give a personal decision, I think I just assume like what's one thing that everyone is probably going to go through, which is probably making a decision on college.
I've done the same. I kind of just basically said, all right, if you don't have a personal thing, the question is what to do after high school, college, vocational school, work, military, and and even if you have already made that decision, make it for a friend or something, just to work through the process, right? Because I think what we're trying to get to them is even in their future life, how to learn a process, not solve the immediate problem, but learn the system, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting, Michelle. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, that's absolutely right. It's to give them from some frameworks to hopefully be able to use going forward. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great if you want to do that instead, or go into that direction. And I would say I will probably keep the workbook exactly the same as it is right now. And what I would say is then for you guys in talking, you can say, hey, I know the workbook asks the question like this. If you want to explore it instead of this kind of a personal question, if you want to think of this scenario, what are you doing after high school? Then you can answer it as if you're answering that question. And that just be the question that you're working toward. Does that work? Awesome. Don, I thought that was a really good question. And I think you're absolutely right that some people could really get a little shy with that. I think that's absolutely true. And you're right. They don't like to share what they had for breakfast. Keeping that to themselves for sure. But okay, awesome. So are we good with where we are right now and how to reframe this to hopefully get them to answer the questions or learn the framework, even if they're not answering it on a personal level? Okay, good. Let's keep going then. We can keep going. Yeah. All right. So then after that, we talk about decision-making frameworks. Joseph gave a little hint to this one because he started talking about the decision matrix. But here I would just ask them like, hey, have any of you heard of any of these things? And allow them to pipe in. Most people will have heard of a pros and cons list, but then just highlight kind of, hey, here's what each of these do and here's what they're for. So pro cons gives you an idea of what are the goods, what are the bads of a more simple decision typically. Decision matrix, I liked what Joseph already had going. He had the whole decision matrix up showing like, okay, so you weigh each different thing and you have a set of different ideas that you want to weigh. And so this is really helpful when you're making a more complex decision. Joseph, do you have any feedback on that?
No,
No.
I just think like some kids may not know what these things are, and so I want to give an example. Like I have no clue how to do Pareto analysis examples for kids yet, but I'm thinking through that.
Yeah, and with the Pareto analysis, what I would say is just it's the idea of working backwards from thinking of what is the result I want, and then thinking, okay, so how do I make decisions now that help me? Like, what are the biggest things that move that big decision that I want? And I think an easy way to think of this is if someone's like, I really want an A in bio or in chem or whatever. They're like, I'm making all the right choices, but still somehow I'm struggling to get this. So this doesn't exactly result in decision making in this particular case, but it can a little bit. The idea that if you know you want an A in bio, first take a look at what are the biggest things that are going to move the needle in your grade in bio. Like look at the curriculum or the rubric. See like, oh, if tests are 50% of your grade, homework's 10%, participation's 10%, all these other things are lower chunks, then really focus on the tests. And so even if you're doing all the homework, all these other things, and you're working so hard, you might be spinning your wheels if you're not also focusing on the big ticket items. So that idea is really to get them to focus on like, okay, but what's the big ticket item? You might be doing a lot, but you might just not be focusing on the right thing when you're making those decisions. So again, here it's that returning to that first decision, whether it be what college I go to or something else. This is helping them write out the decision and what option might apply to it most and why. So we'll go 2 more. And the last key point is just, it's very mindset based and it's on embracing decisions and the points around decisions. So embracing things like uncertainty, imperfection, the fact that there will be some decisions that are bad, that happen. Again, we can go forward a couple slides. One more slide. Oh, yeah, no. Okay, great. Yeah, so this is just focusing on like, hey, what are some things that you might experience while doing decisions? Because a lot of times the negative can be one of the things that adds into that decision paralysis is thinking, oh, what if it happens wrong? So the last question we'll ask here, we can go one more slide, is can you think of a decision you made that turned out to be a bad one, not be the best one? Maybe you were disappointed in the decision. What did you learn from it? Basically to remind them that same thing we had before is fail better. This ties directly back into that class saying, of course, sometimes things aren't going to work out. Sometimes we do our best and things don't work out right. But what did we learn from it? And there's still a positive there. So that's the idea of this class and wanting to really give them a couple frameworks that are a little more concrete to work with and helping them apply it along the way to either a test scenario or something they're actually wanting to dig into a little more. Are there any questions or thoughts on this one? This class? Either
Michelle,
of the classes?
I have
Yeah.
a question. And one of the things I was thinking about doing, but I don't know if we'll have time or if it's the best use of time, would involve like just doing a decision matrix, but it would require like maybe doing a whiteboard on Zoom. And my question is then, does the YC team have the ability to do Zoom whiteboard if we put up like a decision matrix and said, okay, how do you weight this thing? How do you get some examples from the group and say, okay, this is why this total is going to be better than this. You know what I'm saying? Do a hypothetical.
Yeah, I love that idea. We do have the ability to do whiteboard. We haven't done it before, but we can get some practice in between now and Wednesday.
And I have one. I framed up a decision matrix whiteboard. If I could probably share, but I'm very newbie at sharing and doing on the Zoom. But if we can do that, or we can do it offline, figure out how to do it, because it might be worth it, or it may just be a time sink. I don't know yet, but it might be worthwhile.
I think that's a great way to interact with people. I think that's a really fun idea. I love that. I think that's a great ad. Yeah, so Kim, can you go ahead and look into, and we can meet about it tomorrow sometime, about whiteboards and decision matrices in Zoom, and we can make sure we know how to do that for Wednesday. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Do you have a specific, so you want us to be able to write it in during class of like, oh, then this is like, here are the different things you want, or do you want to provide that for us?
I'll send you like a screenshot of my whiteboard.
Okay, great.
And then you guys can either change it or whatever. It was just kind of, off the cuff thing.
Great. Any other questions?
So overall, it sounds like the idea is to move towards having them fill up the workbook prompts like during class, trying to include those like times where, you know, you set the timer to 25 seconds, like you said, and then have them fill it out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Most of these questions shouldn't take more than 30 seconds to answer. And I think at most we have like 6 or 7 questions. So altogether it should take 4 minutes for them to answer all the questions throughout class. Yeah, so that's the idea. And I think it can go really, really, really well. I think there'll be a couple weeks when we're a little bit wobbly on it, but I think it'll go really well when it starts going smoothly. Any other questions or feedback? Okay. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Appreciate you guys. You have no idea how much I brag about you all every day. And so thank you for being awesome. And I will talk to you later. Let me know if you have any questions. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.